Okay, digital transformation, pretty much table stakes, I guess, for businesses today, but many seem to be struggling to deliver, I guess, digital success because they've sort of taken it on as one big project and therefore probably find there's just too much complexity to deal with. Is that a fair sort of assessment of what's going on?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I think people start when they start their digital transformation piece, they look at a process and they think, well, that looks great. We can fix that. And then that expands and expands and expands and expands. And before you know it, you've got 20 or 30 processes that they're trying to fix. And then you go to the board and you say, hey, we can do all of this stuff, but give us a couple of million quid in 2 years and we'll fix it. And most times the boards are saying, no, we haven't got that kind of money. We haven't got that kind of time. So actually the digital transformation piece, because there's so much to do in an organization, can expand really quickly. So part of the challenge we have at the moment is actually to, as I call it, keep the lion in the zoo, or stop creating the elephant sandwich, right? You don't want to let the lion out because it just goes too quick. Or you don't want to create an elephant sandwich that becomes too big to eat. And that's part of the challenge. The technology piece is relatively straightforward in most cases. It's actually the business case. It's actually the business piece that goes with it that actually becomes the challenge.
Okay, so the alternative and presumably the better chance of success approach is to sort of cut up digital transformation into step by smaller steps. And I mean that sounds easy, I guess, but in terms of how to put an approach together, how do you go about it, particularly, I guess, in terms of prioritizing what to prioritize?
Yeah, I think there are several main departments in an organization. So you take your finance, you take operations, you take logistics, all those various bits and pieces. And each one of those will have 2 or 3 opportunities to do some kind of digital transformation piece. I guess what we're trying to get to is have the conversation about which one it causes the most pain from a point of view of the manual process that people take, but also which one has the biggest ROI against it. And then that's a conversation we're having with the organization to say, well, that one appears to take you 5 people a day to do, so why don't we can reduce that to 1? And that one over there costs you £500,000. So which one do you want us to go for first? And so we're trying to have those conversations rather than joining them all together. We try to take an individual process and almost an individual document and do those one at a time. So a digital transformation project becomes a 20 or 30 grand spend and 2 weeks to build, rather than, as we said earlier, 2 years and a couple of million quid. So often the organizations, we try to make sure that we're focusing on the ROI and we're focusing on the manual effort that we're saving to help people do their work a bit better. Because that's where the board will say, if it's going to be 20 grand in 2 weeks, I'll do that one.
Yeah, I mean, is it easy for whether it's the board or other folks in the organisation to work out the balance between quick wins and, you say, longer term, which might deliver much bigger benefits, but as you say, it might take more time and more money, or is it just very much a sort of gut feeling or different decisions for different organisations?
I think sometimes we end up with several of these, what we call customer stories, if you're following kind of the world of Agile and how you build a project with Agile. So often we can stand in front of the board and say, we've identified these 6 or 7. Our thought is we do that one first. So let's ease of use, let's say accounts payable. We can fix your accounts payable pretty quickly. That means you get to see how we work. So we build up some rapport and some trust in terms of how we work together, but we can deliver you this benefit. Now, if there's anything on this board of stories that you think should come first, then let's have that conversation. But so you're outlining the ones that you found, but you're giving them the one option, and that really helps instead of going to them and saying, give me 2 million. So, and then of course the board can make the decision. Well, actually the HR onboarding looks a bit more interesting to us than the AP thing. So can we have that conversation? And so it's collaborative in terms of you're talking to the departments and bringing out from them the kind of the stories and the ROIs and the business cases and the benefits. And then the board are doing what the board should be doing, which is making the right decision based on the business benefit that they see that can come first.
And I guess over time, the idea is to scale up the digital transformation, but alongside that, I guess there's managing potential risks as you do that. So how easy is that to sort of get the benefits of digital transformation without introducing any sort of unintended consequences that might not be positive, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah, you can end up in compliance hell, right? If you go too far too quickly. Our friends in compliance love a story like that, don't they? So, but also there's a risk of infrastructure. You can end up putting too many products into that process, and also if you make that project too big, it's difficult for them to manage. That's when it does become the elephant sandwich because you've got too much going on. So sometimes when those projects are signed off that are too big, you've got too many spinning plates. You've got the compliance issue of all the documents and the processes. You're introducing too many new products. You're asking for too much new infrastructure, and then because you're trying to do too many things too quickly, the project becomes difficult to define to then state where you are in the project. So 6 months down the line, everybody's in meetings saying, "Well, hold on a minute. I thought you were doing this, no that. I thought you were doing that, and IT don't like that, and compliance don't like that." It becomes too big. Whereas again, if you're thinking about things from an individual process, individual project, you're de-risking it because you're establishing one at a time the things that you need to implement. So 18 months down the line, you might have implemented 5 products to make it work. You might have done 100 days of consultancy. We might have had to have gone through 3 routes of compliance checking, but you've done it in steps. You've not tried to lump the whole thing in one great big piece. So our methodology is to try to reduce the risk in terms of the investment they're making, but also in terms of all the process and procedures that you touch as part of that process.
Okay, and then alongside that, I guess you've got the sort of change management piece. So are you able to gradually get folks to accept, digital transformation, or is that more of a sort of one time, this is what's going to happen and can you get on board? So how do you manage change management,
Yeah,
which is
that's
obviously
yeah. Change of people is the most difficult thing, right? So you're right, to say change management that is really tough. You've got people in a finance department that have manually processed an invoice for the last 15 years, and that's the way they've always done it. And now you're walking up to them and saying you don't need to do that anymore. You pop it in that scanner over there, or it appears in an email, and you don't do anything until it appears at this other end. And these 17 things that you used to do manually have now gone. And people don't like change. So again, if you're doing that as an individual process, you might have that conversation with finance, but then your next piece might be in operations or it might be logistics. So it enables you to handle the change management piece, because if you try to do that again as a whole, it becomes very difficult and it becomes disaffecting. And unfortunately, we have had customers where we may have gone too big, and you go back and see them a few months later, say, "How are you getting on?" And they say, "Well, we stopped using it. We went back to our old method." Well, why? Oh, because one day it didn't quite work and we didn't understand what it meant. So therefore, we went back to the old way of doing things, which of course is not what people want. That's not what people signed up to. So you can have the greatest technology in the world and you can implement it beautifully, but people are still the problem because they don't like change. So digital transformation is about change management, and it has to be done in small steps.
And I guess, I mean, alongside you say people the biggest problem, but we've got this thing called AI that's arrived in the last couple of years. And I guess, although obviously it's been around for a while, its momentum now. I mean, when digital transformation projects sort of first came along, AI wasn't really a thing. So do you, bear in mind AI is pretty substantial for businesses, do you try and incorporate that into your existing digital transformation strategy, or do you run AI sort of as a separate project? Just your thoughts as to how those two things can be brought together, or should they not be brought together, if you like?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question actually, because so if you think about we've got about a tech stack of about 13, 14 products. So when we arrive at a customer with and understand what their issue is, we pick from those 13 or 14 products the right product to fix the issue. And in some of those products, there is a claim that it's now AI, but it's not really. It's machine learning. It's not real AI. Some products genuinely do have AI in them. So, it's again, you're still picking the right product to suit. And in some cases, AI can have a tremendous benefit in terms of doing even more automation of those things like document classification. That's really tough. Handwriting recognition is really tough. And AI is doing a really good job of helping us to do that. But not every product has AI in it, even though those products might claim that they do. So actually, there's two parts to it. The processes we can enable with a bit more AI, and over time, as those products really start to include AI as part of their stack, then we can include it in, and then we can shorten those processing times even more. But your day-to-day AI of people asking ChatGPT what to do or Copilot what to do, we leave that out the way. We're trying to make sure that we are using AI to the best that we can in terms of the digital transformation piece. Today, it's okay. There's a bit of AI in there, but you ask me that question again in 12, 18 months, and I'll probably tell you that, everything is completely AI, and we don't need to do anything now. We just press a couple of buttons and it does it itself. So, because that whole model is changing so quickly, isn't it? It's massively changing. So we just have to make sure that we're up to date with it, to make sure that we understand where AI is fitting into those products and those workflows, and what we can do to shorten those process times.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of benefits and the success of digital transformation, should it be obvious to companies when things are going well, or conversely, if they don't think anything's going well, does that mean something's wrong with the process? So I suppose what does success look like for a digital transformation project, if it's possible to quantify?
I think there's two parts to that. The scale. I think some organizations that are growing struggle to scale because they're using a manual process to do something. And so therefore, if you take kind of new customer onboarding, we've worked with some organizations where they just had a team of people and the new orders were coming in and the new customers were coming in, and they just struggled to handle the volume of that because the business was growing. The business had a proposition that was selling well. So for us, digital transformation is about enabling those organizations to scale. It's not about reduction of people, because those people can be used to do lots of other things. It's about the scale of how that organization grows. So when we see success as being a process where you had 3 or 4 people who manually move those documents to the process, to the point where almost those people are now doing something completely, because the digital transformation handles 95% of that process. So when we go back and talk to organizations, that's often what we see. Well, those 3 people over there that was doing something, they're now off doing something else for me, because that process is being handled, which means I can handle more invoices, which means I can handle more customer orders. I can take in more new customers, because I don't have to have somebody manually doing the work. And so actually there is a saving, of course, because those groups of people can go off and do other things, which means they don't need to recruit those people. But actually the real trick is the scale of the business to grow, because their processes can handle an increase in whatever it is that we're trying to achieve.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of factors behind that, says obviously you've outlined various things already, but the mixture, I'm always fascinated, the mixture of people, process, and product, that sort of classical balance. Is there a sort of, are any of them more important than others, or is it just the most important thing, getting the balance between all 3 of them right, and that might vary from organization to organization?
It varies all the time. I think if you take some simple processes like AP, generally you are taking people out of the AP process and you're moving them onto other things. So that's really simple to pick out. But in some of the more complex bits and pieces we've done, it varies constantly in terms of the people, the process, the technology, and what bits you do use, and what's the percentage of the bits that you use or you get an ROI on. Which is why, again, going back to my original point, and apologies being a bit stuck record on it, is if you're doing it process by process, it's easy to identify the business case and the ROI. Because if you're trying to do it as a whole, some of those things get lost. And you're saying, well, those groups of people, they should have been moved off to do something else. They're still there. Why are they still there doing it? Because it gets lost in the whole, rather than thinking about it as an individual piece. But there are some stick-on processes like HP, AP, HR onboarding, where you've got a clear kind of common route of how you make those things work and the benefits. But some of the more complex stuff, it can be varied quite drastically in terms of people, process, technology, and the mix of how you use all of those.
I'm just wondering, I mean, is there a sort of what I call a standard set of digital transformation rules that apply to all businesses, or is there maybe some, more basic truths for everyone, and then you need to add the specifics for an organization? What does a
Uh,
digital transformation framework look like, I suppose?
yeah, I guess. I guess if you're more than 10 years, if your organization is more than 10 years old, then you're probably using legacy systems somewhere, and you're probably using some kind of legacy process, and that process probably includes paper and it includes manual process. So if your organization kind of fits broadly into that category, then you probably need some form of digital transformation. And actually, what we also understand is the bigger the organization, the worse the problem gets. So people have this assumption that, I'm not going to mention any names, but some marvelous corporations who are multi-million, billion pounds that sit on the FTSE 500. The assumption must be that because they're that size of organization, they are perfect in their operations. They are not, right? Because they are 100 years old using 20-year-old legacy systems, and their finance process was designed in 1978, and they've never changed it since. So but if you're born younger than 10 years, in the last 10 years, you're probably already born digital. You're probably already born with a Zero or some kind of Sage Online system or doing something like that. So therefore, take Amazon, right? But anything older than 10 years is the rule about you're probably right for a digital transformation conversation. And if you're using legacy systems, then again, you'll probably need a digital transformation type conversation. So they're the kind of rough frameworks of where it sits in terms of how customers play.
Yeah, and for those, I mean, which I imagine is most organizations who have a current digital transformation strategy, if it isn't delivering, which it sounds as if that may well be the case for most, is it possible, if you like, to rescue an existing digital transformation strategy, or is it better off to sort of put that to one side, start with a blank piece of paper or computer screen, and then come up with a fresh approach, or can you somehow sort of rescue success out of a failing digital transformation strategy?
Yeah, no, I think you can rescue it. I think most of those things come down to two things. I think it comes down to, was the actual customer story understood first? That's where sometimes it fails. People don't really understand the problem and therefore what the fix is. And I think people get involved in technology too quickly. So they say, oh, yeah, I can see that problem. Here's a lump of technology, off you go. So, which means the second part where it fails is back to your point about change management. So you introduce technology too quickly, which didn't really understand and fix the problem. And then you didn't do a proper change management process to help everybody understand the bit that you did before. So you've got a lump of technology that users don't understand why it's there, and they then fight against it because you didn't do a proper change management piece. So sometimes, and that technology might be right, by the way, that piece of technology or that process you do might be absolutely right. But so sometimes what we're doing, and actually I was in a customer yesterday where we're doing this very process, we're going right back to the start of, leave the technology working for the time being. I know it doesn't quite work. Let's reevaluate your process. Why are you doing what you're doing today? Let's rebuild the customer story. And then once we've re-established the customer story, then we can go down the route of understanding whether that technology and that process is correct. So it's about the story at the end and the change management piece. Sorry, story at the start and the change management piece at the end. That's the bit where things go wrong. So those things are easy to then go and fix.
Okay, and I mean we've got a flavour of what it is you do, but I guess to finish would be, give us the sort of full picture of what it is Apogee brings to the digital transformation landscape. How do you help folks with what's obviously quite a complicated process?
Yeah, so Apogee is owned by HP. So we've got the backing of HP in terms of our digital services piece. We've got a large team here. Our world is, we want to sit down and understand what customers are doing today and what challenges they have. So we're asking our customers what their most important documents are. We're asking them what the problems are with those documents. So we're building out that list of customer stories. And then we want to sit and work with our customers to understand what the business case and the ROI is for each of those stories, so that we can present a case to the board to have a phased and small chunk implementation of those pieces. We have a tech stack of 13, 14 products. We're bringing one or two new ones in at the moment. And we've got a bunch of people like me who have been doing this thing for a long time. So when I started doing it, it was called a print workflow. It's now got a fancy name called digital transformation. And so our team is full of engineers, full stack developers, but more importantly, we've got a bunch of consultants who don't necessarily care too much about technology. What they care about is the problems that the customers face and what we can do to help them to scale, to reduce cost, to make their processes run better. And that to us is the most important part of that. But then we've got the technology stack and we've got the people then to implement what we've agreed with the customer once we've decided and understood what it really is we've got to solve.
And I mean, is there a typical sort of customer start point? I mean, do they say, contact you and say, we've heard about this digital transformation, we need to do it? Or do they come to you and say, we're not keeping up with our competitors, what can we do better? Or is it various ways? What are the sort of, I suppose, the indicators that would say to a company, we need to get on with this?
Apogee's got around 7,000 customers out there, so we're doing quarterly business reviews with them. We've got a lot of data, so actually sometimes the data says to us, hold on a minute, why are you scanning on that machine, all that scan, what's going on? And that sometimes the data that we have of our customers enables us to have that conversation. But often the customers are themselves, especially in today's world, about hybrid work. I know there's lots of conversations about people going back to the office or staying at home and all those kind of things, but that actually has forced people internally to say, well, actually, if I'm at home, how do I still doing that thing? How do I still do what I'm meant to be doing? Because if I'm in the office, I can do it because it's there. But if I'm at home, how do I do it? And so those processes that people do where they know they have to be manually touching something, that document or that process, they're saying, well, if I'm going to be at home Tuesday and Wednesday, what am I going to do? So that has forced that conversation to come up. That has forced that kind of piece. But also, there is the third piece of how are my competitor doing all of that? How are they growing? They're growing at 15%. I'm growing at 4%. Why are they doing that? And often the answer is because the competitors found a way of doing it, which means they can scale. So all of those 3 or 4 things fly into those pieces. So often that comes out in our business reviews with our customers. We do a lot of events where people turn up and say, I can't do what you've just said. Can you help me? But also it just comes out of frustration of, I'm scanning 20,000 pages and I know I shouldn't be. What can you do to help me to do it?
And maybe just finally, you mentioned earlier, that everyone kind of thinks these huge corporations have got it all, they perfect. Is how would you characterize if you like, the average company where they are? So what I'm saying is, if you think you're failing and someone else is ahead of you, is that true, or is the general consensus that most companies are still struggling to a certain extent with digital transformation? So even if you're only just starting out now, you've got a chance to keep, it's not like you're 5 years behind to catch up. Give people a positive, or if it is a negative, sort of, encouragement as to digital transformation.
There's nobody out there that's perfect, right? Because otherwise I'd be retired and I'd be on a beach somewhere and we won't be having this conversation. I think everybody, whether you're a 5-man band sitting somewhere or you're a corporation with hundreds of thousands of employees, everybody has the need for some kind of digital transformation. Everybody. So don't assume everybody, as I said, don't assume everybody else is perfect. Don't assume your competitors are perfect. They're probably not. They may have implemented a piece of digital transformation for one process or 2, but they've still got 5 or 6 or 7 to do. So actually, everybody's in the same boat, and everybody's trying to work out how we move from a world of lots of paper, lots of print, lots of manual, to this world where we're all doing cool stuff on our phones. And that jump is still is still happening everywhere. So don't feel like you're behind. You're probably not. But also, people like us can help you to jump ahead quite quickly once you understand what those processes are.
And finally, because I keep, sort of, but in terms of a time frame, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, digital transformation project, it's not like, a fixed point and then, we've done it. We can, sit back and enjoy it's a continuous process. But is there a, a sort of average time whereby there's, significant benefits start accruing for digital transformation? Or does that vary too much depending on size and type of company? Or can you
Yeah, it varies a
confidently
lot.
say that, in 18 months' time, you will have a great digital transformation strategy? Or
I think if you pick each process by process, right? So you can deliver those in weeks, not months. So if you take an AP, you could deliver an AP process in a few weeks. You could deliver an HR onboarding process in a few weeks. So if you're picking them off bits by bits, if you said, well, I've got a year, you could probably pick out 4, 5, 6 digital transformation processes and get them done in a year. And then you'll see the massive benefits from that. As I say, going right back to the start, we're not saying give us 2 years and give us a couple of million quid. We're saying give us a lump of money in a small amount of time and we'll do one. Get it signed off. You agreed. You're happy. Well, then move on to the next one. And of course, as you are then doing one, others start to appear because you start to understand what people are doing. So it is a continuous piece, but you can see benefits in weeks, not years or months. That's the key, I guess. If you're picking the right process that has the right timeline against it and the right ROI, those two things kind of come together.
okay, I mean, it's been brilliant to chat, and thank you so much for
Pleasure.
sharing
Thank
so many
you.
fascinating insights on digital transformation, which, as I say, I know has been around for a while, but still causes people a degree of complication. So, Matthew, really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.